As with all these Teams things, there is a chat facility on the probably the right hand side, might be at the bottom of your screen, or there's a Q&A, which I think is exactly the same thing really, but do feel free to pop some questions in there as we go. You are all muted, so I've got the floor as it were, but I can always go to you at the end and answer or ask, feel free to ask a question, or if you want to raise your hand again, I can come to you at the end, so we can certainly do that later on. So today's topic is about the KPIs, key performance indicators within Herd Companion. So as a standard milk recorded herd, all of your data is compiled onto here, which makes it so great. And there are several ways you can get into the KPIs. So this bit won't take too long today because it's sort of a small compacted area, but it's useful nonetheless. So to get there, initially, there are three options really, so you can't go wrong. Breeding and fertility, it doesn't matter where you start from. There's a KPIs option here. We've got the same one under production, obviously it covers both of those topics. And herd performance, you've got KPIs there as well. So any one of those will take you to the same screen. Key performance indicators. Now this part of the site has been here for a long time. We have updated it and refreshed it to be more in keeping with the newer parts of the site and just a bit more modern approach as well. So we have these different areas. I'll just talk you through these one by one. So production and fertility, those are the sum totals of your KPIs here. Production ones, you can see from the headings the types of things that these refer to. So lots of milky ones. We've got protein and fat per year, plus our average percentages, cell counts and so on. Now these figures possibly won't compare to anywhere else, and I would suggest we don't look at anywhere else as a direct comparison, but as a guide. These are rolling 12-month values, so up to the end of the last complete month. Now I'm using the demo herd here today, which is Hartpury University, so you can of course view your own figures on there. And if we have any vets or consultants that have joined us or listening into the video, you've got the real capability here to compare all of your herds, which we'll come on to in a bit, but you can view any herd and then obviously swap to a different one. So my database at the moment is just the one herd. So rolling 12-month values, as I say, this is up to the 31st of July. We may have recorded in August, but it's not a complete month. Even if you record at the very end, it will always look to be a month old, if you see what I'm saying. So just bear that in mind. So average figures for those rolling years. As with anything on Herd Companion, you have the ability to filter with these white boxes here. If you're looking for a particular value, there is a key to the right of those where you can specify, I want something that is dead equal to that, or I want a less than or a greater than option. So those you can then pick and choose from that table. If I scroll to the bottom, you do get then an average compiled of those values, and it goes back 2 years. So we've got 2 years worth of data on there. We can also sort by, so the date is obviously the most recent at the top by default. If you want to have a look at your range of cell counts, maybe we can just click on average cells. Single click is ascending order. Click again and you get descending, just as a guide there. Okay, and then the other thing is group by, but I don't think for this purpose it would be too relevant really. So those are your production ones, and then the fertility ones, similar sort of table. And in here we have average number of cows, mean parity, excuse me, which is average lactation number, basically. Percentage of cows in parity 1, so again lactation 1, what proportion of the herd are those heifers. Average age at first calving, so this is in days. Average calving interval. Now this is an interesting one. Calving interval less than 385%. What on earth does that mean, Kath? Well, I'll tell you. So with a gestation length of 280 days, in order to reach a calving interval under 385, you've got to have become in calf by 100 days, 285 plus 100. So this is looking at the proportion of cows that have a lower calving interval, i.e. in calf rate at 100 days, in a sense. Now, as I say, if you were to compare a 100-day in calf rate to something else, you'd find quite a different figure. These do wait, so it's retrospective, hence the need for a different sort of title. But they wait until the cow is calved, and then it works backwards and says, were you in calf by 100 days, yes or no? And if yes, then I'll add you to my overall figure here. Okay, but it gives you an indication of, how if we are block calving, or sorry, if we're all year round calving, how quickly these cows are getting in calf, to attain that calving interval, if indeed that is the desired outcome. But 100-day in calf rate is essentially what that is. And then we have a culling rate and a death rate. Now these figures are quite of zeros in here. It just depends on how those culls or sold animals are coming in, if they're not as a specific dead. Okay, so those lots and lots of figures, not too interesting. Let's get some graphs and then we can see exactly what's happening. So KPI graphs, methodological step, but you can of course go straight into here. So this breaks it down a bit and gives you a much more clearer picture of what's happening. So our KPI, milk per cow of year of life, I think that's just the first one by default, but you can choose anything you like in here. So these are all of the production and the fertility ones together. So we could pick out average sales, for example. And then we know how well we're doing. We've seen it in a table. We can view it on the pink line across here. But the interesting bit here is, as always, how do we compare to other people? So we have a benchmarking option. And at the moment, this one is set, and it's adjustable. It might just default to whatever was looked at beforehand. An NMR group, so the group number 12, of Holstein herds over 100 and less than 200, so between 100 and 200 cows in size. So if that's appropriate for your herd, by all means compare yourself to it, or you can choose one of these options. Now those two at the top I've set up myself, so I'll explain those in a second, but everybody will have all of these NMR groups and they are defined by the title themselves. So we've got some different breeds going on down here. We've got organic herds, we've got Northern Ireland, its own special little group, and we also have milk per cow per year sizes and Holstein herd sizes as well. So the idea is you pick a group that's relevant to your herd. So I can just swap it between now. That will update. There we go. And then we've got this green area. So these are benchmark group range. That's the fluffy looking cloud, light green. Benchmark group mean is the solid green line. And current herd, black with the pink blobs, that's you essentially. So over the last, almost three years actually, we can see how well, now bear in mind this is rolling 12-month values, so very often this line of ours is quite flat unless you've got huge deviations. So how well we're doing over that time, so we had a little peak here in April 21, came back down again, compared to the average in the group, which is this solid green line, so above average just about, but actually, pretty much there now. And the range of the group, I'll just move my mouse aside for a minute without pointing, but we've got the top end of that green area. So this line along here is the highest herd in that group, and the bottom end is the lowest herd. And that may not be just one herd. It could change, the sort of winning herd or the losing herd, if you like, could change, part way through. So it's a continual line, but it gives you an idea of the range for the herds that are in the 305-day yield particular benchmark group. Each of those groups that got an NMR title has got 50 herds in it. They are full recording herds, have been for at least 5 years, so we've got consistency of data, and they meet the criteria of that group heading, so pure and simple. We do update those probably yearly just to make sure we've got the right herds for the right descriptions. And then you can chop and change. So you might want to keep the benchmark group, but have a look at some other parameter. Maybe we will go on to average lactation. So again, just let that refresh. There we go. So have we introduced some different protocols here? Have we had a bit of a clear out of older cows, something like that? There'll be explanations, I'm sure. You'll see as I move the mouse over the graphic, it can be a bit distracting, but it does give you an idea of all of those figures. So if you want to read something specific off the graph, you can see that's the 2.94 there. And if I move down to here, it's 2.93. So just a very subtle change there. Below the graph picture, we've got then the actual raw data. So current herd will be you, minimum benchmark group, so that's the lowest herd making up that light green edge, mean, and then the top end as well. Okay, so you can study, as I say, whatever KPI you like against whichever benchmark group. Now, if I just go back a step to one of these, there is a little setting up here called new benchmarks. So this is possibly only relevant if you have more than one herd. If it's a single herd as a farmer you're looking at, there's not much you can do in here, but this is where it becomes really interesting for vets and consultants that have lots of herds on Herd Companion, or even a farmer, feed group maybe, that you've got several herds together. So these are just two I set up as an example, but we have the ability to create our own benchmark groups based on the herds that you've got permissions to view for, over and above the NMR defaults. So then it can be really specific. So you can see here I've got an organic herds group for herds in my practice that are organic. So put in whatever description you like. The full example, I've only got the one herd to show you, but you get the idea. And then I've got a high yielding herd group for specific criteria here as well. So we can create a new group. Usually you'll see lots of herds listed here. You give your group a name and a description, and then you can actually ping across all the herds. So it's a manual process, but once they're in that group, they will stay, unless you move them out again or whatever. You can be then really detailed in whichever selections you like. It's local knowledge at the end of the day. If you're the consultant or the third party, you know exactly which herds have which type of management system. Could be a geographical location, whatever you like. You're in charge here. So you add the herds to that group, and then that will refresh with a new group appearing here. So as I say, once that's on your Herd Companion, that's then saved. And if we then go back, now if I go back there, that's not going to work, is it? I've got to go back to my KPIs actually, back here. It will then have recreated that group and allow you to compare it to, any one of your graphs again. If it's too much figures going on, or, too many individual graphs, let's have a look at the at a glance. So this one will give you everything side by side. Now, interestingly, we have some black arrows on this one. So what does that mean? Well, possibly we haven't got the right group selected for this particular herd. I'm looking at 305-day yield, 7 to 9, as before. And the black arrow means that my herd, is outside the range of that group for those particular parameters. So we have you. So again, this is your herd. These are your, again, rolling 12-month values for those milky ones. The best is the top end. So you can see if you compare these figures here, we're better than the best one in that group. So possibly not the ideal comparison, or equally you can make yourself look really good. The mean is the average, and then the worst is the bottom end, in a sense, down here. So let me choose a different group setting. I'll go for this one for a minute. Just let that refresh. There we go. So that gives us much more sensible range. Again, all the KPIs listed, so there's nothing to stop you going straight into this graph, and then you can explore an individual one if it catches your eye. So just the same as the green area on the individual graphs, it's now a blue line. I sit here, I hover the mouse, it tells me the percentage, so I'm 61% for average number of cows. I'm a bit low on parity, it's just a sort of top 15% if you like, bottom 15, actually that's the worst area, isn't it? You can get a real sense of where you sit for everything together. Any point in time that you want to take something out of Herd Companion, we have got an export, so that would load it into Excel, and then you can take it offline and put it into a report or something like that. And then again, relative to third parties, really, we've got this comparison by herd. And again to farmers, actually. I don't want to discount you at all. So we can see where we sit in a bit more detail then for this one. So still looking at a particular KPI compared to a particular group, I've now got a different viewpoint. So we're actually listing each of those 50 herds. You see these are just literally herd number 1, herd number 2. in descending order for that parameter. So you can really see a detail on the range. So this is our lowest one down here, 2.14, and the highest one, 377. And the yellow one is me. This is my herd again. So not only am I in the sort of bottom 15%, but you can see exactly how many herds in you are. It's only 50 herds, of course. And then all the raw data relating to that is down here. Every parameter for every herd. So these are all anonymous herds. We don't know who they are. Of course, if you're a third party doing this, you will know exactly which herd is which. But this becomes really useful for maybe a farmer meeting or a presentation that you're doing where things do need to be kept anonymous. You can run certain graphs into a nice PowerPoint with all those figures there. So there's my herd again in yellow, stands out a mile, so exactly where we sit. Average for those groups as well, always interesting, particularly if you've got, again, a lot of herds and you want to compare, maybe the east side of the practice with the west side, something like that. And again, we can use the sorting mechanism and the filtering to great effect. So for cell counts, I can just sort on the figures. So the graph is still the parity one, that hasn't changed. But for cell counts, that's where I sit, pretty much in the middle. Average of 185, I'm at 166. And then if I wanted the graph for that, I can just change it here. It gives you the same values, but it just splits it between, individual figures and a graph as well. So that's much more visual, isn't it, to see? So interesting. You've got some way up here as a rolling average, and some way down here. So really interesting data just to explore, where you are compared to others. And, for the herd as a whole, where you are compared to yourself. Perhaps more importantly, how have you progressed over time with those individual graphs, over the last couple of years. So that really is it on the range of the KPIs. But one other thing I did want to share with you, which is quite topical, a little bit unrelated, but I thought I'll throw that into my KPI webinar because that's really useful. So under the I reports, we've done a study in collation with Kite for 1,000 kilos of fat and protein. Just came up to I reports and then latest completed lactations, which again everybody will have access to if you're full recording. It actually gives you that combined figure together, 305-day fat and protein, for each cow that has completed one lactation. As soon as they're dried off, as soon as that dry date hits herd companion, it will recalculate. And then, of course, these might well be in towards the end of the next lactation, but until that's completely finished, it won't do an update. So I can sort by that one, and then you can just see, within your herd where all of your cows sit, or who is my best 1,000 kilos. There we go. We've got quite a few there to pick from. So it's just an interesting insight. And if you wanted more info on that study, there is a link. I've just put it up here on the NMR website to show, the information about it, really. So yeah, quite a useful bit of information down there. So if you go onto nmr.co.uk and news, you'll see it on there.